The cop at my car window said, "Ma'am, you're listed as a missing person in a report that was filed 7 years ago." I stared at him. That has to be a mistake. I'm not a missing person. But he was already turning his laptop around so I could see the screen. There was my name, Natalie, my exact birthday, and a photo of my face from years ago with big red letters across the top that read, "Active Missing Persons Case." Officer, this has to be some kind of system error. I've been living in the same apartment for 2 years. I have a job. I pay my bills. None of that is possible if I'm a missing person. He pointed at the screen. This report says you're 19 years old and disappeared at age 12 from a town about 5 hours from here. I shook my head. I'm 25. I've been 25 since March. There's no way I'm 19. The officer tapped the file. There's a birth certificate attached to this report, and it says you were born 19 years ago. I told him that wasn't right because my mom had my birth certificate at home, and I'd seen it with my own eyes. He asked if I had a copy on me or anything that could prove my date of birth other than the license he was holding. I didn't have a copy. I'd never needed one. Mom always kept all the important documents in a lockbox in her closet, said it was safer that way, and I never questioned it. My hands were starting to shake. I can prove I'm not some missing kid. I went to high school and graduated, class of 2019. You can look it up. The officer typed in the high school name, waited, and when he looked back up at me, something in his face changed. There's no record of you ever being enrolled at that school, and no record of you graduating. That didn't make sense. I remembered high school. I remembered friends, hallways, and graduation day. But when I tried to picture the details, like my teachers' names or what classes I took, everything got blurry, like trying to remember a dream 2 days later. Schools lose records all the time, I said, but my voice was shaking now and I couldn't stop it. He scrolled further into the file. The missing person report says you were last seen leaving a middle school at 12 years old, wearing a blue jacket and carrying a backpack. Something cold ran through my whole body, because I had a blue jacket in my back seat, right now. I'd had it for as long as I could remember, and told people I got it in high school, but I couldn't actually remember buying it or anyone giving it to me. It was just always there. The officer pulled up another screen. The FBI generated an age progression photo 2 years ago to show what the missing girl would look like today. He turned it toward me, and my heart stopped. It was my face. Not similar, not close, my exact face. With the same jawline, same eyebrows, and the same little scar on my chin. I pressed my back into the seat like I was trying to get away from the screen. That could be anyone, I whispered, but I didn't even believe myself. He kept scrolling. The report was filed by a woman named Allison, who is listed as your mother. I shook my head so hard it hurt. My mom's name is Denise. She raised me my entire life. I don't know anyone named Allison. The officer kept reading. Allison has contacted police over 400 times in 7 years. She has never stopped looking for you. He paused on something and read it silently before saying it out loud. The last note Allison left with investigators says, "She won't know she's missing. Whoever took her will give her a new name and a new age, and she'll believe every word of it." My whole body went cold. I thought about every document I'd ever needed in my life and realized Mom had handled all of it. Every form, every signature, every record. I'd never held my own birth certificate. I'd never seen a single baby photo of myself. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling back through my camera roll, because if I was really 25, then somewhere there had to be a photo from childhood, from middle school, from anywhere. But the oldest photo on my phone was from the week I moved into my apartment. Before that, there was nothing. No birthdays, no holidays, nothing. I always told myself they got lost when Mom switched phones and never thought about it again. The officer watched me and then said quietly, "I have to make a call." He dialed a number from the file and put it on speaker. It rang 4 times. A woman picked up and said, "This is Allison. Is there news about my daughter?" And when I heard her voice, something broke open in my head. A memory hit me. I was 4 or 5, lying in bed, and a woman was tucking the blanket under my chin and whispering goodnight. She had the same voice as the woman on the phone, not the woman who had been raising me for years.
The cop asked me to follow him to the station. I said yes, but not because I believed him. I said yes because I was completely sure that once I sat down with the full case file, I could point to the mistake. There had to be one. A mixed-up social security number, a database glitch, some kind of wrong entry that got my name attached to someone else's life. That's what I told myself the entire drive over. Inside, the cop brought me to a small room with a table and 2 chairs and a laptop already open. He sat across from me and turned the laptop so we could both see the screen, and then he started walking me through the case file. Not the summary I'd seen on the side of the road, the full thing. He went piece by piece, slow, like he wanted to make sure I caught everything. The missing person report was filed 15 years ago in a town about 5 hours east of where we were sitting. Attached to the report was a photo, not the age progression one he'd already shown me. This was a real photo of a real little girl, maybe 4 years old, with messy hair and big eyes and a scar on her chin. I touched my own chin without even thinking about it. My fingers found the little raised line of skin I'd had my whole life, the one I never really thought about because it was just part of my face. The cop watched me do it and didn't say a word. He just kept going. The report lists 7 addresses across 7 different states in 15 years, he said. Every time Allison got close, the trail went cold and a new address popped up somewhere else. 7 states. I tried to count the places I'd lived growing up, and I could only come up with a few off the top of my head. But the more I thought about it, the more I remembered boxes. Always boxes. Mom packing things in the middle of the night sometimes, telling me we were going on an adventure, telling me the new place would be better.
Going on an adventure? Mom was literally running from the feds and sold it to her kid like they were going on a road trip. Packing bags in the middle of the night, telling her the new place would be better. Nah, that's not optimism. That's a woman who had her story rehearsed and ready to go. Actually insane. I always thought we moved a lot because she couldn't find the right job or because rent was too high. I never thought about it harder than that. I asked the cop about records, job records, school records, anything that would show a normal life during all those moves. Anything that would prove Mom was just a regular mom who moved around a lot and nothing else. He shook his head. No employment history under the name Denise until 3 years ago. No school enrollment records for you at any of the 7 locations. Whoever moved you around kept you off the grid. The room felt like it tilted sideways. I grabbed the edge of the table. I remembered being homeschooled. Long stretches of it, sometimes a year or more at a time. Mom always said the local schools weren't good enough, that she could teach me better at home, that I was too smart for what they were offering. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mom. She sat with me at the kitchen table and went through workbooks and made flashcards and quizzed me on state capitals. That was real. I remember it being real. But now I was sitting in a police station looking at a screen that said none of it was official. No records, no transcripts, no proof that any of those kitchen table lessons ever counted for anything in the eyes of anyone but the 2 of us. The cop pulled up one more thing. A blurry image from a security camera. It was from a grocery store parking lot dated 15 years ago. The picture was grainy and washed out the way old security footage always is, but you could make out a woman walking fast toward a car. She was holding the hand of a small girl in a blue jacket. The woman's face was turned away from the camera so you couldn't see her features, but her posture, the way she carried her shoulders a little hunched forward like she was always bracing against wind that wasn't there. The way she leaned slightly to the left when she walked, like one leg was just a tiny bit shorter than the other. I would recognize that walk anywhere. I had walked behind that woman through parking lots and grocery stores and shopping malls for as long as I could remember. It was Mom. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen, at the blurry woman, at the little girl in the blue jacket being pulled along by the hand. That little girl's feet were almost off the ground because the woman was walking so fast. I tried to say something, anything, but my mouth wouldn't work. The cop let the silence sit. He didn't push me. He didn't ask if I recognized her. He just waited, like he already knew the answer and was giving me time to catch up to it. After what felt like forever, he closed the laptop halfway and looked at me. His voice was quiet when he spoke. The woman who filed this report has been waiting 15 years to sit in a room with you. She's already on her way. She lives 2 hours from here. My first thought was to leave. Just stand up, walk out the door, get in my car, and drive until I was somewhere none of this could reach me. I didn't want to meet a stranger who said she was my mother. I already had a mother. I had Mom. I had 15 years of birthdays and inside jokes and late-night talks on the couch with the TV on low. That was real. That had to be real. But then I looked at the laptop again, at the half-closed screen still showing that blurry parking lot photo, at the little girl in the blue jacket whose hand was being held so tight her arm was stretched straight. That little girl didn't get a choice. She didn't get to decide who picked her up or where she went or what name she would grow up answering to. And I realized I didn't have the right to walk away from her without at least hearing the full story. So I stayed. I sat in that hard chair under those ugly lights, and I waited for a woman named Allison to drive 2 hours to meet a daughter she hadn't seen in 15 years, while I sat there trying to hold together a life that was coming apart at every single seam. Allison got there about 2 hours later. I saw her before she saw me. There was a glass partition between the hallway and the room I was sitting in, and I watched her walk through the front entrance with the cop meeting her at the door. She was shorter than I expected. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. In my head, the woman from the phone call had been tall, confident, someone who filled up a room. But Allison was small. Her shoulders were pulled in tight, and her hands were shaking so bad I could see it from where I was sitting. She was holding a manila folder pressed against her chest with both arms wrapped around it like it was the only thing keeping her together. I studied her face through the glass, and I waited for something to happen inside me. Some kind of spark, some pull, some deep down feeling that would tell me this woman was connected to me. But nothing came. I felt absolutely nothing. She was a stranger, just a short, nervous woman in a hallway clutching a folder. I almost relaxed. For the first time in hours, something in my chest loosened up because this felt like proof. If this woman was really my mother, wouldn't I feel it? Wouldn't my body know? Wouldn't there be some kind of signal, some instinct that said, yes, this is her. This is where you came from. There was nothing like that. She could have been anyone. And I held on to that for about 30 seconds, like a rope thrown to someone who's drowning, because it meant maybe the whole thing really was a mistake. Then the cop brought her into the room. She sat down in the chair across from me. She set the manila folder on the table between us, but kept one hand on top of it like she wasn't ready to let go yet. She looked at me, and her eyes were red and wet, and so full of something I couldn't name that I had to look away. And then she said, "Hi, Natalie." That's all she said. 2 words. But the way she said my name did something to me that I still can't explain. She said it soft, careful, like she was handling something made of glass. Like she had been saying that name out loud to herself every single night for 15 years, practicing it, keeping it alive, making sure her mouth still remembered the shape of it so that when the day finally came, she would get it right. And my throat locked up. My eyes started stinging and I had to blink hard to keep them dry. I didn't understand why. I had never met this woman. I had no memories of her face, no connection to her that I could point to and say, there, that's why. But my body was doing something my brain couldn't keep up with. It was like some deep, buried part of me recognized her voice, or her eyes, or the way she held her hands, and it was reaching toward her even while the rest of me was trying to pull away. Allison must have seen something in my face because she took a breath and opened the manila folder. Inside were photos, baby photos. The first one was a newborn, red-faced and wrinkly with tiny fists balled up near her ears. The next was a toddler sitting on a blanket spread out on green grass, squinting into the sun. And then there was a photo of a little girl, maybe 3 years old, with birthday cake smeared across her cheeks and a huge, goofy smile and a scar on her chin. The same scar. The exact same spot. Allison pointed to it with a finger that was still trembling. "You fell off the porch steps when you were 2, she said. Hit the edge of a flower pot. I drove 90 miles an hour to the hospital. They gave you 3 stitches and you screamed the whole time, but then you laughed when they gave you a popsicle." My hand went to my chin, again, like it had been doing all night. I pressed my fingers against that little raised line of skin, and I thought about what Mom had always told me. She said I got the scar from a bike accident when I was 8. She said I hit the curb and my chin bounced off the pavement. She told that story so many times I could picture it happening.
But I was looking at a photo of a 3-year-old girl with the same scar already there, years before any bike accident was supposed to have happened. Allison kept going. Her voice started out steady, controlled, like she had rehearsed this part too. She told me I was 4 years old. We were at a grocery store. She was loading bags into the trunk of the car. I was right there, right next to the cart, close enough to touch. She turned her back to put the bags in, and when she turned around, I was gone. 15 seconds, she said. That's all it was. 15 seconds and you were just gone. Her voice cracked on the word gone. She kept talking. She told me about the first year, how she drove to that same grocery store parking lot every single night after it happened. She would park in the same spot and roll the windows down and just sit there. Like if she stayed long enough, if she was quiet enough, she would hear me calling for her. She told me about the calls to police, over 400 of them. She told me about private investigators she hired with money she didn't have, maxing out credit cards and borrowing from family until nobody would lend to her anymore. She told me about the age progression photos she had made every single year. Every year, she would go to a specialist and have them create a picture of what I would look like at that age, so she would know my face even though she wasn't there to watch it change.
Her voice was shaking by now, and tears were running down her cheeks, but she kept going like she couldn't stop, like she had been holding all of this inside for 15 years, and now that the door was open, she couldn't close it. And then she reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Not gentle, not like someone asking for your hand. She grabbed it hard, her fingers closing around my skin tight enough that I could feel my pulse pressing against her grip. Her eyes were wide and wild and full of something that was bigger than this room, bigger than both of us, something that had been building for 15 years with no place to go. I need you to understand that I never stopped, she said. Not for one day, not for 1 hour. You were always my daughter. You were always mine. I tried to pull my arm back, but she held on tighter. Her fingers were pressing white into my skin now. Please, she said, please don't leave again. I yanked my arm free and stood up so fast the chair legs screamed across the floor behind me. My wrist was red where her fingers had been. I could still feel the pressure like a ghost of her grip. I took a step back. Allison looked down at her own hand, still hanging in the air where my wrist had been, and something crossed her face that looked like horror. Like she was seeing her own hand for the first time and didn't know what it had just done. The room went completely still. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Allison's face crumbled. Not slowly, not piece by piece, just all at once, like a wall caving in. She put both of her hands flat on the table and pressed them down hard, like she was physically forcing herself not to reach out again. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I've been waiting so long and She stopped herself, took a long, shaky breath, sat back in her chair. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, smaller. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I mean that. I'll sit on the other side of the room. I'll leave if you want me to. Just tell me what you need. And that right there, that was the thing that got me more than any photo in the folder or any number on a missing person report. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't. She had just grabbed me hard enough to leave a mark, and my wrist was still throbbing, and I was standing 3 feet away from the table with my heart going 100 miles an hour. But she caught herself. She saw what she did, and she named it, and she backed off without making excuses, without telling me I was overreacting, without turning it around to make herself the one who was hurting. She just said she was sorry and asked me what I needed. And I stood there with my red wrist and my pounding heart, and I thought about Mom. Mom who never backed down from anything. Mom who would argue with anyone over anything and never once in my entire life admit she was wrong. Mom who never, not once, not a single time in 15 years, looked at me and said the words, "What do you need?" I didn't sit back down. Not yet, but I didn't leave either. I stepped outside. The night air hit my face, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. The station door closed behind me, and I stood on the sidewalk under a buzzing streetlight and pulled out my phone.
My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it twice before I got to my contacts. I found Mom's name, Mom. That's how I had her saved. Just Mom, with a little heart emoji next to it that I'd put there years ago. I stared at it for a second, and then I hit call, because I needed to hear it from her. Not from a file, not from a laptop screen, not from a stranger sitting across a table with baby photos. I needed to hear it from the woman who packed my lunches and brushed my hair and held my hand in parking lots. The phone rang once, twice, then she picked up. "Hey, sweetie, everything okay? You usually don't call this late." And for a few seconds, I swear, everything was fine. That voice, that exact voice, warm and easy and familiar, like a blanket being pulled up to your chin. That was the voice that read me bedtime stories. That was the voice that called me into the kitchen when dinner was ready. That was the voice that sang to me when I had a fever and couldn't sleep. And she would sit on the edge of my bed and run her fingers through my hair and hum until I closed my eyes. For those few seconds, I was just a girl calling her mom, and nothing in the world was wrong. I almost hung up. I almost said, "Never mind, just wanted to say goodnight, love you, talk tomorrow." I almost let it all go.
The "hey sweetie" almost ended the whole investigation. One phone call and she nearly folded. Can't even blame her though. That voice has like 20 years of bedtime stories and sick day memories behind it. Mom activated the sleeper agent programming with one sentence and almost got away with it again. But then I thought about the little girl in the blue jacket and the photo of a 3-year-old with cake on her face, who already had a scar that wasn't supposed to exist for another 5 years. And I asked the question, "Mom, do you know anyone named Allison?" Silence. Not the kind of silence where someone is thinking. Not the kind where they're confused and trying to place a name. This was nothing. Complete, total, absolute nothing. Like someone reached into the phone line and pulled out every sound that existed. It was so sudden and so deep that I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the screen because I thought the call dropped. It hadn't. The timer was still counting. Still connected. I put it back to my ear and waited. 5 seconds. 10. I could hear her breathing, barely. Just the smallest movement of air on the other end. And I knew she was still there. I knew she was choosing her next words very carefully. And when her voice came back, it wasn't her voice. I mean, it was. It came from the same mouth and the same throat, but everything that made it hers was gone. The warmth was gone. The softness was gone. That easy, familiar blanket around your shoulders feeling was just not there anymore. What came through the phone was flat, measured, each word placed down like a card on a table. Where did you hear that name? Not what name, not who's Allison, not I don't know what you're talking about. Where did you hear that name? Like she already knew exactly who Allison was. Like the only thing that surprised her wasn't the name itself, but the fact that it had found its way to me. I told her. I told her about the traffic stop and the officer running my license and the missing person report that came up on his screen. I told her about the case file at the station, the 7 addresses, the security camera photo, the birth certificate with someone else's name listed as my mother. I told her all of it. And the whole time I was talking, I was waiting. Waiting for her to be confused. Waiting for her to get mad. Waiting for her to say, "That's insane. Someone has made a huge mistake. Give me the number of whoever is in charge and I'll sort this out right now." Because that's what Mom would do. Mom didn't take anything from anyone. Mom fought for everything. If someone told Mom the sky was green, she would argue until they admitted it was blue. So I waited for the fight. I waited for her to be the mom I knew and come out swinging. But she didn't. She didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand to talk to the cop. She didn't say it was crazy or wrong or impossible. She said, "I gave you a good life, Natalie. I gave you everything. A home, food, love. Every single day for 15 years, I gave you a life that woman couldn't have given you." My legs stopped working. I don't mean they got weak or shaky. I mean they just quit.
One second I was standing on the sidewalk, and the next I was sitting on the curb with my feet in the gutter and my phone pressed against my ear so hard it hurt. The concrete was cold under me, and I could feel the rough edge of the curb digging into the backs of my legs, but I couldn't stand up. I couldn't move, because she said, "That woman." Not this Allison person, or whoever filed that report. She said, "That woman," like she knew her. Like she'd thought about her, like she had opinions about her that had been forming for 15 years. "Mom," I said. My voice came out so small I barely recognized it. "Did you take me?" Silence again, but shorter this time. 3 seconds, maybe 4. And then Mom said, "I did what I had to do. I was supposed to be a mother. The doctors said I couldn't, and they were wrong, because I was a better mother than anyone." She paused and then kept going, and her voice was still that same flat, even, careful thing, like she was reading from a script she had written a long time ago in case this day ever came. "I watched her for weeks. I saw how she'd leave you in the cart, how she'd look at her phone instead of watching you. I would never have done that. I would never have looked away." Every word hit me like cold water. Not because she was angry, not because she was crying or begging or falling apart, but because she wasn't any of those things. She was calm. She was clear. She was explaining it to me the way you explain why you chose one apartment over another, or why you switched jobs. Like it was a decision she made after thinking it through, and she was still comfortable with it. She wasn't confessing. She was justifying.
She was sitting in the house I grew up in, on the couch where we watched movies together, surrounded by 15 years of a life she built on top of a lie. And she was completely, totally, 100% convinced that she did the right thing. I could barely breathe. The air was right there, but my lungs wouldn't take it in. I whispered, "You knew who I was this whole time?" And Mom's voice didn't waver, didn't crack, didn't hesitate for even half a second. "I knew who you were, and I made you better. I made you safe. Everything I did was for you." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen. The call timer said 4 minutes and 37 seconds. 4.5 minutes. That's how long it took for the woman who raised me to tell me, without shame, without guilt, without a single tear in her voice, that she stole me from a parking lot when I was 4 years old because she decided she deserved to be a mother, and I was the child she picked. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I just pressed the red button and the screen went dark, and I sat there on that curb with the phone in my lap and the street light buzzing above me, and I didn't cry. Not yet. I walked back into the station. The cop was standing near the front desk talking to another officer, and when he saw me come through the door, he stopped and looked at me, and I could tell from his face that he knew something had happened. I walked straight up to him and I said, "She admitted it. All of it. She's at the house right now." The cop made the calls. Then he told me to wait in the room where Allison was still sitting. She had moved. She was 3 chairs away from where I'd been before, pressed against the far wall, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes on the floor. She didn't look up when I came in. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to touch me or ask me what happened. She just stayed. I sat down and pulled the manila folder toward me and opened it again. I looked at the baby photos one more time. Not because I remembered anything in them. I didn't. The newborn, the toddler on the blanket, the little girl with cake on her face. None of it brought back a single memory. But the girl in those pictures had the same scar on her chin that I had. She had the same crooked little smile that I saw in the mirror every morning when I brushed my teeth. She was me. I didn't have to remember her to know that. About 40 minutes later, the cop got a call from the officers at the house. He came into the room and told me what happened. Mom didn't run. When the officers knocked, she opened the door and stood there like she'd been waiting for them. She was calm, not upset, not scared, not angry, just calm, in a way that made the officers uncomfortable, which is saying something. One of them went inside with her and found the lockbox in the closet, exactly where I told him it would be. They opened it. Inside was a birth certificate, not the one I grew up thinking was mine, a real one, with a different date of birth and a different city.
and one name listed under mother, Allison. Denise had kept it the entire time. 15 years she had that birth certificate sitting in a box in her closet with Allison's name on it. And she opened that closet every single day to get dressed and never flinched. The cop told me this, and I held the phone against my ear and closed my eyes. And I thought about every time Mom told me the lockbox was just for safekeeping. Every time she said important papers needed to stay in one place. Every time I asked to see my birth certificate and she said she'd grab it later and then never did. Every time she changed the subject when I asked about my baby pictures or my birthday or anything with a date attached to it. It was never carelessness. It was never forgetfulness. It was control. Every single day. For 15 years, Mom woke up knowing exactly who I was, knowing exactly who was searching for me, and she chose to keep going. Then he told me what the investigation had turned up about Mom's background. He said her medical record showed she was told years ago that she could never have children. And when I heard that, I thought about all the nights she held me on the couch and whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Those words used to feel like love. Now they sounded like something a person says about a thing they took.
He said she went therapist after therapist, but never accepted what they told her. And I thought about how Mom could never let anything go. How she'd stand at a register and argue with a cashier for 20 minutes over a coupon. How every fight she ever had with anyone ended with her being the victim, no matter what actually happened. He told me she watched Allison's family for weeks before that day in the parking lot. She timed it. She had a car seat already installed in the back of her car before she ever walked into that store. I pictured that. The woman I called Mom sitting in a parked car outside a grocery store, watching a family through the windshield. A car seat buckled into the back and a plan already finished in her head. And I understood for the first time that I was never rescued. I was never saved. I was selected, picked out, like something on a shelf that Mom decided she deserved to have. Then I heard noise on the other end of the phone. Movement, car doors, radio chatter. The cop told me they were putting Mom into the squad car. The officer on scene kept the line open. Mom was quiet through most of it. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't look back at the house. But right before they closed the door, I heard her voice, clear as anything, perfectly calm, perfectly steady, and completely empty of anything that looked like sorry. "You were mine." She didn't say it to the officer. She said it like the words were aimed across every mile between that driveway and this station, straight at me. Then the officer closed the door and the line went quiet. And I sat there holding the phone against my ear, listening to nothing. I put the phone down on the table. I looked at Allison. She was still 3 chairs away, still not pushing, still waiting. I didn't hug her. I didn't call her Mom. I picked up the manila folder full of baby photos and I held it in my lap with both hands. "Can I keep these for a while?" I asked. Allison nodded. I didn't call Allison for 9 days. When I finally did, we talked for 11 minutes about nothing important. She didn't ask about the case. She didn't ask me to call her Mom. She asked what I had for dinner and whether I liked the cold weather. And when the conversation ran out of things to say, she said, "Same time next week?" I said yes. This one messed with me more than I expected, honestly. Like you go in thinking, okay, kidnapping story, this is gonna be intense. And then it just keeps getting worse in ways you don't see coming. The mom not even denying it is what really got me. No tears, no guilt, just, yeah, I did it, and I'd do it again energy. That's terrifying. But then the ending with Allison just asking what she had for dinner and not forcing anything is low-key the most human part of the whole thing. Anyway, that was a wild ride. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.